Hey guys, I hope you're having a great day, and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I've read in the last 3 months. So we are starting April very strong because I read the Bounded by Thorns series, and I have been talking about it in my last videos if you have seen, and so here I am finally talking about it. In the first book, we follow Rosalina, who is a normal human girl who lives in a very small village with her father. Her mother disappeared when she was 2 years old, and since then her father has been not chasing her, but like trying to find her. He is convinced that she has been captured by fays, so by like fairies, magical creatures. Obviously everybody thinks that he's kind of cuckoo, but that doesn't stop George, Rosalina's father, to continue searching for his wife. He actually leaves Rosalina like all the time to go and search for his wife across the earth basically. So he is gone a lot of the time, like for months on end, and Rosalina is stuck being alone in this very little town, and she's kind of being influenced by everybody that her father is crazy and that he's not coming back, and so it's really kind of a dark start. She falls into a portal which transports her into another realm. She realizes that her father might actually have told the truth and that her mother might actually have been captured by fairies or magical creatures, and so she starts going more into this world to try and find her mom. She ends up at a castle where she meets... Does she meet all of them right away? I don't know, but she does end up meeting all 4 princes of this realm. I know the names, but I don't remember all the titles, so I'm gonna just read them off. We have Kildarian, who is the High Prince of Winter, Ezrin, the High Prince of Spring, Dayton, the High Prince of Summer, and Farron, the High Prince of Autumn. So their realm is separated into the 4 seasons, and each of the seasons have their own court and their own prince. Rosalina quickly discovers that the princes are actually cursed, and that there is a huge curse across the land, because not only they are cursed, but their season as well. I think that's all I want to say about this book, because it's so good that I don't want to spoil anything further. The only thing I would say is that it is a reverse harem. Harem. Not too sure how to pronounce that word. So I did know this information going into this book, so obviously I don't think it should be a secret. Like at some point she will get with all of them, because that's what a reverse harem is. But I think that even though you know it, it doesn't really matter, because the story is so well written and the pacing is so good that I think it just makes you want it more, and the yearning is like everywhere, so it's just perfect. So for this series I did read not all the books, but all the books that are out right now. So I have read Bounded by Thorns, which is the first book, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Woven by Gold is the second book, I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Forged by Malice is the third book, and I gave 4.5. Broken by Daylight is the fourth, and I gave also 4.5 stars. And finally Frozen by Stardust, I gave 4.25, because sure. So the 6th and 7th book are actually already announced, so it's kind of a good thing, because you should start reading this series right away, and by the time that you finish it, you will probably be by October, and by that time all the books will be out, so that's just perfect for you. The 6th book is coming out in late July, I think the 28th or something, and the 7th book is coming out in mid-October, I think, something like that. So they're coming out this year, so you don't even have to wait. You can start reading that series right away. I read them all on ebook, so they're actually available on the Amazon Kindle Unlimited subscription. So I read almost all of these books in April, but I did read one more book in April, and I read When Grumpy Met Sunshine by Charlotte Steen. This one I listened to as an audiobook, and it was so good. It was so funny to listen to. It was such a funny, like, it was a romantic comedy, basically. This book is set in, well, not London, but like in the UK, and so the audiobook had the accent, which was so much better. It made it so much funnier. I really recommend the audiobook. So we follow Mabel Williker, Williker, who is a ghostwriter, and she gets this contract to write the biography of this ex-footballer Alfie Harding. Sorry, a memoir, not an autobiography. However, Alfie is actually the worst guy that you could ever write about because he doesn't want to talk about his private life. He is grumpy as hell, and he actually doesn't want to write a memoir, so he doesn't actually want to participate in this whole thing. I don't know how much this book was inspired by the Ted Lasso series, the guy named Roy Kent, but it was so similar that I could not stop imagining this guy as being Alfie Harding. It was hilarious. Like, he would grumble all the time, and in the series he does that all the time just to say that he's not interested. So it was just really funny. Obviously, it's a grumpy ex-sunshine relationship, so they eventually get together, obviously, but I think that he kind of falls for her a little bit first, but it's not the trope. The whole writing style of this book was so good. I really loved it. There were so many jokes, but they were not like forced. It felt like more sarcasm and just play with words that just felt like so natural. The chemistry between the two characters was so good. I loved it so much. I give this book 4 out of 5 stars. In May, I listened to Half His Age by Jeanette McCurdy, and unfortunately, I gave that book 2.5 out of 5 stars. It was not my cup of tea, and it really made me uncomfortable the whole way I was listening to this book. That's not the reason I gave it such a low rating, because being uncomfortable is sometimes what you aim for while writing a book, and it really felt like that was her main goal. I think that just the way that it was written, the pacing was really off. It felt like we were jumping from one thing to another without any link between. I guess that was the point. It really felt like you couldn't connect with the characters just because you would see them like for one chapter, and then for like 10 other chapters you wouldn't see them, and then you would see them again that one time, and then not, and then again. And so it was really weird for the pacing of it all, just to like meet the other characters. I felt like they were there but just not. Also, the writing style I think was the goal, but it was really crude, and it didn't feel like it was written by an adult. I know that she's a teenager, and I think that maybe that was the point, to have like her thoughts be very eccentric and be very childlike, but it didn't like help with the narrator, so it was kind of weird to listen to. I think this book really felt like a huge drama movie that you would just watch when you want to be sad, but at the end you don't have anything out of it. So that was kind of like the disappointment at the end, that I was like, I'm listening to this relationship going like off the rails, like into a dumpster fire, and at the end nothing else happens. It does eventually end the relationship, and I don't think that should be a spoiler, but it just all felt off, and you didn't really get a closure about anything, and I think that's what was missing for me. But I think that the main problem with the book for me, it was the writing style and the pacing of the story. It felt really all over the place. I'm really sad actually to be saying this, because I absolutely adored Jeanette McCurdy's memoir. I loved it so much, and so I was expecting the same writing style to be in that book, but it was so different, so I don't know what happened. In May, I also read Brigands and Bread Knives by Travis Baldree. This is the second book in the Legend and Lattes series. It is a series, but you could also read those as standalones and it would also work. So you don't actually have to have read Legend and Lattes to read this book. It would help, but like, you don't really have to. In this book, we follow Fern, who is the mouse on the picture, if you can see it. You have a mouse, you have an elf, a horse, this little goblin, who is also holding a knife, I believe. So we follow the mouse, whose name is Fern, and she is a bookseller, and she travels to Thune, the village where Viv was in the last book, to open her own bookshop. She actually manages to open the bookshop, and it actually is doing quite well, but she realizes that it's not really what she wants to do in her life, and so she really gets lost, gets drunk, and falls asleep in the back of a wagon, and she wakes up like hundreds of miles away from home. She ended up falling asleep in the elf's wagon, and this elf is Astrid the Oath Maiden. So she is like a bounty hunter, very, very known, and so Fern is kind of freaking out because she doesn't want to get killed by this woman, but she doesn't, and she ends up realizing that Astrid is actually carrying this goblin, whose name is... I don't remember. The goblin whose name is Zill, and that goblin has a bounty on her head, and so Astrid is a bounty hunter. So obviously she's got Zill captured, and she is trying to bring her to the place where you have to bring the bounties, I guess. Fern, well, obviously decides to hop along this journey because she has nowhere to go and she cannot like go back to her home on foot, and so she stays with them, and a whole bunch of little adventures unfolds. This is very a D&D-esque book. I give this book 3 stars. Unfortunately, it wasn't my favorite compared to Legend and Lattes, which I absolutely adored. This book was very cozy. That's not the problem. That it did have some like action scenes, but it wasn't too high stakes. The problem I had with this book, it felt like the author decided that he was famous because of Legend and Lattes, which was a very cozy fantasy book, and I felt like he wanted to prove himself with this book that he can actually write. And so there were so many words in this book that felt like they were like university level words that you could just have written any other word that was a normal word, but you decided to take the complicated word. And so every chapter, every few pages, I always had to Google some words because I didn't know what they were. English is not my first language, but like I feel like I'm quite advanced in the English language to read most books and not have to Google any words. But in this book, I had to Google so many words that like halfway through the book, I gave up and stopped Googling the words and just ignore the word if I didn't know what it meant. There was a word that was used and it meant just like a flag, and it was a really complicated word for nothing. Like it didn't have any like historic meaning like that. It was just a complicated name for a flag. And I was like, wow, okay, so you really decided to just bring it on this book, and I'm just really disappointed because I did not have as much fun reading that book than Legend and Lattes. I do have Bookshop and Bone Dust right here, and so I do want to read it, but it might not be so soon because, well, I'm afraid it might be the same writing style. In May, I listened to First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. I have talked about this book in my last videos. I absolutely adored this book. It was so good. It also felt like a romantic comedy. It was so funny. I listened to this as an audiobook, and the voices were so good. The chemistry between the two characters, it was perfect. So in this book, we follow Lucy Stone, who is a mother of a 10 or 12-year-old girl, and she is a single mom, but her dad is in the picture because he is gay. That's a whole thing. Her daughter, fearing for her mother's relationship status, I guess, calls into a radio show about love and asks for advice. So Lucy Stone ends up being on a radio show about falling in love and dating and like finding a boyfriend, and the host is named Aiden Valentine, and so he is trying to help out Lucy find the love of her life. This book was so good. It was so perfect. I love it so much. The voice of Aiden and the voice of Lucy, they were so good. They felt right together, and I loved it so much. The girl, the daughter of Lucy, she was hilarious throughout the whole book because she is there like almost all the time, and she was hilarious. I could not believe the words that were coming out of her mouth because she's a child and like she would say stuff. Well, you know, children, they don't think, they just speak. Even though it's like just one book, it felt like a slow burn romance, which I really, really loved because obviously they're on the dating show for Lucy to find somebody. And so Aiden is not really in the picture at the moment. And so it takes a while for them to actually think about each other, but it was so worth it. It was so good. I give this book 4.25 out of 5 stars. The only reason being there is at some point a little miscommunication trope which I completely hated with my guts. I hate so much the miscommunication trope. I feel like it's the worst trope, and I feel like it's not a realistic trope to have in any story. Like, people talk. People just say things to each other. So I really feel like even in that case particularly, they talk to each other all the time. They're on a radio show together, and so they were so open with each other, and at some point they just stopped talking about their feelings, and I'm like, dude, like, it's not realistic. I also read a duology in the last few months. I read The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent, and the second book, The Ashes of the Star-Cursed King. It's a long title, goddamn. These two books were so good. I have never read something like this in a very long time, and maybe I don't read enough, but like, it was so good. It is about vampires and monsters and other creatures, but mostly vampires. So in this world there are humans, vampires, and other creatures. Obviously the humans are not like safe from the vampires. Vampires are like the classic drink human blood, have very big strength, they're immortal, they die under the sun, stuff like that. We follow Oriah, who is a adopted human daughter of the Nightborn Vampire King. So it's a whole deal. She was saved by him when her village was completely destroyed in a fire. So her whole life she has been weak, the weakest one amongst the vampires. So her life has not been easy. She has been trained her whole life to fight off vampires and to be as strong as them. Almost. The only way that Oriah can be held into some type of respect by the other vampires is to win the Kejari, a legendary tournament, so like Hunger Games, that is held by the goddess of death herself. So the goddess Naxia. Is that her name? Did I pronounce it correctly? No. Nyaxia. By winning the Kejari, you can ask the goddess for one wish, and for Oriah, her wish will be to make a Coriatis bond with her father. The Coriatis bond actually, it's a bond between two souls, so the souls become one, and so they share powers, life, everything, and so she would not be mortal anymore, and she would not be so weak anymore. But winning the Kejari is actually super hard. Vampires try to do it and most die, so like, it's hard. So during the tournament, unfortunately, Oriah has to make some alliances, and so she ends up being an ally to this guy named Rain, who is a Rishan vampire, which ends up being the territory that is enemy to her father's territory. Rain is obviously like the bad guy, and he's like so handsome and so mysterious and everything. Like, it's the obvious thing that happens. But not only that happens, but the tournament was really nice. I loved the challenges that were put in place. It was really creative. I really liked it. Oriah and her father Vincent's relationship was so like cute. I don't know how to describe it, but like, it really felt like a father-daughter relationship. Truly, he was always like trying to protect her, always trying to prove her that she, well, while he wants to protect her, prove her that she can actually defeat everybody at the tournament and win the Kejari, even though she's just a human and she doesn't have the strength to beat a vampire. Her father actually really believes that she can, and it really felt like a real relationship, which you don't really see in fantasy. You don't really get family relationships like at all. Mostly people are dead, And so that was really nice. I am not going to talk about it for too long, but I did read a French book last month, which is Rire Jaune by Camille Beauchamp, it was a very interesting book. I got it for Christmas by my mom, who really wanted to know my thoughts on this book because it is about an adopted Chinese girl who is growing up in Quebec, where I am. So it's like really close to home. In this book, she talks about her experience as being an adopted girl, but it is still a fictional book. So it's not about Camille's life. It is about a created fictional character, but still it feels close to home. It was really funny to read because her whole personality of the character was so off from who I am as a person, and so everything that she would do, I was like, wow, damn, that's not me at all. But every single experience that she's had about her race was identical to mine. So that was so interesting, but it felt like this book was whitewashed for the public. I feel like it was made lighter and funnier so that white people won't be too offended by the real experiences, and so it felt nice to read about, but it felt like the tip of the iceberg, and even the tip felt like a fake. It was like a movie that you see that you're like, it's too good to be true, like something is off. She does talk about some dark racist shit that happens to her, but in the end she says like, no big deal. So it's weird. I'm iffy about this book. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Last month in June, I really felt like reading some graphic novels, and so I read The Baker and the Bard by Fern Hod, which is a cozy fantasy adventure, and it felt like a really cozy fantasy adventure. However, I'm glad I didn't pay full price for this book because it was fast-paced, meaning that not a lot of stuff happens, and so you flip the pages kind of fast because it's mostly like really nice paintings that you look at, but like nothing happens. And so the story was also quite like direct. It felt like a kid's book maybe. I don't know how much it was supposed to be for adults. Maybe it's a kid's book and I'm just dumb, so who knows. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars just because it felt a little flat, and I felt like you could have added a little more story to the whole thing. God, the other 3 books that I read are the Lore Olympus series. I read volume 4, 5, and 6 by Rachel Smith. These are compilations of her online webtoon, and so I'm not actually gonna talk about these books because I'm in the 4th book, so that would be spoilers, but I can talk about the first one. We follow the main story of Hades and Persephone's whole story, actually. This story doesn't follow the story that is told historically in the books. Honestly, like, I really just love the graphics of it. I feel like it's just so pretty. I just really love it. And lastly, I listened to Caught Up by Nevessa Allen, the second book in the Into Darkness series. Unfortunately, that book was not a hit for me compared to Lights Out. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, and I will explain why. This book was really good. It was like a whole story, but at the end it still felt unfinished weirdly, and like there was a whole like thing at the end, and so I don't know why it just felt like you were missing something. The relationship between Junior and Lauren was like a bad decision at best. Like at worst it was like a warrant arrest. I know that these books are like the point, but like still, it was a lot. Also, like half of the book is about politics and like being open about sex workers, and it felt like it was really forced into the book. I felt like it wasn't like naturally involved. Lauren is a sex worker, and it was fine that she was a sex worker, but at some point it just felt like she was just trying to talk about how much they deserve the rights, and they do, but like I wasn't reading a political book, but it felt like I was, and I I wasn't interested. Also, like, Lawrence got a lot of trauma, and at some point we just stopped talking about it. And I was like, oh, where is the trauma? Like, it cannot just disappear halfway through the book because you decide to embrace the guy. Like, that's not how it works. I feel like that's not how it works normally. However, there is a thing that I really loved. It was the velvet, like, whole part, because it made me discover things that I didn't know existed or that I didn't know would be interesting. And so I really love that part. Made me discover some more things about life. Also, another reason why it's just a it's a 3.5 out of 5 stars. One of the secondary characters is a they them, and it was so confusing, and I was listening to an audiobook, so I was even worse because, like, you are paying attention but like 80%, like your brain is doing something else. Like, I'm listening to the audiobook while I'm driving, so like it's more actually 50-50. Like, I'm listening but like I'm also driving, and so if the sentence is confusing, I am very much confused and I don't follow the rest of the story. I have to go back and re-listen to the sentences because I'm like, who did what? When did that happen? Like, I'm lost. I think the main problem is because English is not my first language, and so it just also feel like a lot of work to listen to the book and also think about the sentence. Like, it needs to be fluid. I am so sorry. I did not think it would be such a long video just because I realized that there are way too many books, so my next wrap up might be sooner. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Tell me down below which books you have read in the last few months that I really should read. If you have any recommendations, please leave them down below. And if you have read any of the books that I have mentioned, what did you think about it? Maybe we don't have the same opinion, and that's fine. Just tell me down below. Alright, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys next week. Goodbye.